barista anymore, and I'm gonna tell you why. But first, this is a brown sugar shaken espresso with bananas Foster cold foam. And I just want to say for the record, any coffee shop that I've been a barista at could never, would never. This is all me. This has got my name, Stefania, all over it, okay? All over it. So, as of recently, I am no longer a barista. Again, sort of. I'll explain. I posted this video some time ago now. Not too long ago, actually. And I'll link it up here if you haven't seen it yet. But basically, this video announced to all of you that I was a barista, yet again. As many of you know, I've been doing content creation, freelance videography, and social media consulting full-time now for coming up to almost a year. I started doing all of this full-time in August of 2023 following an unforeseen mass tech layoff that I was unfortunately a part of. I may or may not have accidentally manifested that layoff. I was writing in my journal for some time about how I wanted to do all of this creative stuff full-time, but I was just too scared, and I was waiting for the time that I was ready, and you know, the universe just swooped in and was like, okay, boom, you're ready now, deal with it and figure it out. The universe has a really funny way of doing that to people. Eventually, after a few months of doing it full time, things just started to click, things started to work, and we were off to a pretty great start. So I did that for a while, and then came this video. Basically, long story long, if you haven't seen that video yet, essentially about 3 months ago now, I was presented with an opportunity at a local coffee shop to assume a part-time barista position. And hi, hello, I am a coffee-focused creator. I've been a barista for many years. My life revolves around coffee. I love coffee. It's a huge part of my life. My days literally revolve around it, okay? Being behind the bar and having an apron on sounded like something that I missed, and it sounded like fun, and it sounded like something that would help me balance out my time a little bit better, because I'm a workaholic. I can fully admit to that. I'm a perfectionist, I'm a workaholic, and when I start editing, I could get locked into editing for like 6-7 hours straight with no break. So I was getting to a point where I was like, okay, I need to create some sort of balance in my life again. And I talked a lot about balance and all of what I'm saying in that video that I posted a couple months ago. The owner of this coffee shop was also a fellow Chicago entrepreneur. I thought that they could serve as a great mentor to me, so when the opportunity came, I took it. When I posted that video, you guys were really supportive in the comments, and I'm laughing because some of you were really supportive. Like, some of you left some of the sweetest comments, and I love you for that, thank you. But I could tell who had been subscribed to me for a while based upon what some of you were commenting, because like, God bless your souls, you were like, yay! Are you sure that's what you want to do? Good looking out, because as it turns out, that's not what I wanted to do at all, and that's not really what I was looking for. But I obviously didn't know that yet until several weeks into the position. Even though it turned out it's not something I necessarily wanted, now looking back, because hindsight is 20/20, I do think, however, it was something that I needed to go through it. So let me tell you the tea first, and then I'll tell you the meaning behind the tea, which is equally as important. But let's talk about the tea first, because I've been dying to tell you guys this. Okay, first off, right off the bat, my first day. Let's just talk about this, because I feel like this experience was like low-key dystopian. Like I felt like time and space didn't exist for several weeks. This was also around the whole eclipse and everything. Like, I just felt like the energy in the air was so weird. Like, there was just so much going on, so much change, beginnings feeling like endings, endings feeling like beginnings. So like, there's just so much newness in the air, right? So took this job, went for my first day. Turns out my first day wasn't even a first day. Technically, my first day was a working interview. So what that basically meant was they got 6 hours of free labor out of me, and I got nothing in return except for stained shoes and hair that smelled like espresso. But I digress. So first-ish day, working interview day, I was told to be there out front of the store at 5:30 a.m. sharp. And obviously I'm very punctual, I'm very prompt. So I got there at 5:25 a.m. on the dot. I was like, I'm gonna be 5 minutes early. The owner of the coffee shop told me that the manager of the coffee shop would be there already and would let me in, and I wouldn't have any problems. So I got there, I arrived, and I'm 5 minutes early, so I'm like, okay, maybe the manager just isn't here yet. The coffee shop was pitch black. Clearly no one was inside, no one had entered yet. So I'm just standing out there, and I'm like, okay, I'm the one who was early, so like, I'm gonna give it a minute, you know? So I'm standing there, I'm waiting, I'm standing there, I'm waiting. 15 minutes goes by. It is now 5:40 a.m. and no one has shown up yet. And I'm now literally about to go home because I'm convinced at this point that either I got the wrong day or like it was my fault, right? No. 5:43 a.m. I literally remember the exact times. 5:43 a.m. rolls around and someone shows up. He approaches the store, he looks at me and goes, "Oh, is the manager not here yet?" And I was like, no. I've been waiting out here for like almost 20 minutes at this point on a Chicago busy street at 5 in the morning. If you're a woman, that is every woman's worst nightmare. There were only like truck drivers and stuff around. That is women's safety 101. We don't like that. So I was like, yeah, can we just like get inside, please? Like, can we get off the street? So he lets me in. Manager eventually shows up around 5:50, okay, 10 minutes before the store opens. And I'm just like, wow, I'm getting major deja vu right now. 6 hours goes by. It's time for me to leave. Manager tells me, hey, the owner wants to have a word with you, just kind of discuss how the day went, kind of get your feedback, you know, they're gonna give you some feedback, just hang out in the lobby and I will get them for you. So I go, I sit down. I proceed to sit down and wait 25 minutes. Find out after 25 minutes, owner is not in the building and is not planning on coming back. So I had just been sitting there for an extra half hour for no reason. So I have no idea where this manager got that from, but whatever. I went home, successful first dish day. I came back the next day. They officially extended me the job offer. All was well until I'm told, as I'm getting the job offer extended to me, that the base pay at this cafe, that rhymes, is $9 an hour. Now, Chicago minimum wage is $15 and something cents. $9 an hour is like, I think it's called like sub minimum wage or something, and it's essentially the minimum wage that tipped employees, so basically like servers and bartenders will get in Chicago. But just for context, I just want to say a lot of like restaurant servers and bartenders in the city of Chicago, yes, they're getting paid $9 an hour base, but that's because they're getting paid bank in tips. At coffee shops, people typically aren't tipping $20, $30, $40 on a tab, right? At a restaurant, if your tab is like $200, $300, which these restaurants in the city aren't cheap, the server is gonna get tipped out at least like 40, 50 bucks, right? If the service was exceptional and all that stuff, right? So, you know, $9 an hour, it doesn't, not that it doesn't matter. I'm a believer that everyone should be getting paid minimum wage base at the minimum. Okay, that's why it's called minimum wage. But for context, like, they're getting tipped hundreds of dollars in one shift. We're not. So because we accept tips at this cafe, we were technically paid as servers. Now, the other local cafe that I worked at, they paid us $15. Like, they paid us minimum wage and then we got our tips on top of that. So I was just really surprised when this was disclosed with me. But again, I was mostly in it for like the balance and the experience and the exposure and the learning and all of that. So I was like, okay, I'm just not gonna hone in on that. And maybe, just maybe, tips are really good at the store. I don't know, maybe. So whatever, I find out my schedule for the next week and I have 3 5 a.m. shifts back to back to back that next week. Personally, as somebody who has lived in the city of Chicago now for coming up to 3 years, 4 years, I just don't like to insert myself into any situations where anything can go bad. And I do know from watching the news and having the Citizen app and everything that a lot of crime happens in Chicago overnight and in like the wee hours of the morning. So I just don't want to be caught in the middle of anything. Like, there's no reason that I should be walking the street at 4:45 in the morning. Like, that's just not something I'm interested in. So that next week, when I had these back to back to back 5 a.m. shifts, I called an Uber because unfortunately there was no good bus line that dropped me anywhere near the cafe. I would have had to go way out of my way, connected to another bus to bring me back. It didn't make sense. It was gonna be like a 45-minute bus commute and the cafe was not that far away. So my options were either walk to the cafe or Uber, and I wasn't gonna walk at 4:45, so I Ubered. And 3 days in a row, boom, 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 I paid $15 in Uber each day. So within 3 days, 3 morning shifts, I had paid almost $50 in Ubers. And I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of defeating the purpose. Like, I am paying more money to get to my shift than I'm like even receiving in tips at this point, so this doesn't make sense. It was also that same week where I found out that I technically would not be able to share in the tip pool until after I was out of training. So I was just making $9 an hour at this point. Like, I wasn't making tips, I wasn't making anything, and I had no idea when training was going to be over. That same week, I also found out, which I'm pretty sure this is like low-key illegal, that they didn't do breaks at that store. So they strategically would schedule people, me, for 7.5 hours, but they wouldn't do the 8 hours because an 8 hour meant a break, and they didn't believe in 10 or 15-minute breaks. So on my first week of being like on the team and everything, the manager verbatim told me this: we really don't do breaks here. You could take a 10 or a 15-minute break if you want, but no one does. Okay, well, that's not exactly encouraging. With everything else that I've been balancing, I'm working with clients, I'm literally editing people's videos, I'm editing people's social media content for these businesses' websites and accounts. I am not at a point right now where I can be away from my phone, away from my computer for 7.5 hours straight. I thought for sure I would at least get like a 10 or a 15-minute break somewhere in between there so I can respond to people via email if I needed to, but I didn't get that. So I found myself week 2, week 3, like taking bathroom breaks just to be able to look at my phone. I shouldn't have to like excuse myself to go to the bathroom just to have a break on a 7.5 hour shift. Do you know what I'm saying? So after the first couple of weeks of having to do these 5 a.m. shifts, I communicated my availability, and I expressed to my manager, I expressed to the owner, like, hey, me paying for Ubers every morning right now, if I'm in training and not getting tips, is not working for me. So please, can you start scheduling me at a little bit of a later block, like a 7 a.m. or an 8 a.m. shift, so I can walk to work and it'll be light out. They responded really well to that. The next week they scheduled me, what was it, like 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. or something. Like, that was my shift that week, which I didn't mind that at all. That lasted for about a week, and then they went back to scheduling me on those 5 a.m. shifts, even though I had communicated a couple of times at that point that I prefer the 7 a.m. block. So availability just got ignored. And the other thing that I wasn't really fond of too is, you know, at Starbucks, at some of these other cafes that I've worked at, typically the manager would do the schedule for a week or two, honestly 2-3 weeks out at a time. This cafe only did it a week out, and the schedule would post on Saturday, like for the week that was about to start. So I would only know what shifts I was working 36 hours before the week started. I'm very, very type A about my schedule, my planners, like all of that. I need to be able to know what my schedule is at least a couple of weeks out so I can plan accordingly. That's just who I am as a person. I've always been that way. For those of you who are baristas, if your cafes work like this, let me know. But I've worked at a few different cafes, and like, we always had our schedule at least a few weeks out. Last bit of tea that I'll say is I found out that training was actually going to be a month or longer, which meant that I wouldn't be able to share in the tip pool until at least 4 weeks. So for like 4 weeks, I was making $9 an hour. Maybe that would have worked in 2015, 2016, but we're in 2024 and we're in the city of Chicago, and a dozen eggs are $7. You're telling me an hour of my time, if I subtract $2 from that, that's a dozen eggs. I worked an hour for a dozen eggs, like, come on. So here's where I'm gonna get a little vulnerable with you guys, okay? Because this is when a lot of things like really started to set in for me, and you know what? We're done. We're done with the script, we're done with the talking points. I'm just gonna talk directly to you, okay? Let's be candid about this. Throughout that time of being a barista, again, I mean, it lasted like 4 weeks, I was being paid a lot less than what I would expect to be paid at this point in the game with where the economy is at and everything. No breaks, schedule not being posted, availability being ignored, on my feet for 7.5 hours straight, which I can do that, I've done it before, that's not a huge deal, but at the same time, like, I'm at a point now where I have other things going on that I need to check my phone for, I need to communicate with people, I need to collaborate with people, and to go almost 8 hours completely being absent on a weekday from my phone and my computer and not being able to be communicative with people, it just wasn't working. But I think above all of that, I think what really hit me kind of hard was this feeling of, I thought that this position, this opportunity was gonna be like a beginning for me, but in reality, I think it was actually more of like an ending, or an ending of a cycle almost. It got to a point where being behind the counter again was getting in the way of things that I really truly love. And I love coffee, but I'm not willing to trade coffee and like sacrifice videography and sacrifice all of my freelance work. I'm not willing to do that because I'm passionate about this over here too, and I don't want to throw this under the bus for this. So I quit. And it made me realize something really important that I think has been something I haven't really wanted to face, if I'm gonna be honest, because I think sometimes in life, as human beings, we get to a point where we're almost afraid of our own power. We're afraid of our own potential. And for a very long time now, I have said to myself, like, one day I wanna own a coffee brand, and one day I wanna share my love for coffee and coffee products that I create with my subscribers and my followers. And I kept always saying one day, one day, one day. I think this job reminded me of how much I love coffee and how much I love being behind the counter. But I think it finally became apparent to me that the next time I put an apron on and go behind a counter and serve people, it's gonna be me running the show. It's not gonna be some other person telling me to be there at 5 a.m. and completely ignoring my availability. And the fact of the matter is this, you know, just because I'm not actively working as a barista at a cafe currently, doesn't mean that I'm not a barista. Like, I didn't leave all my coffee knowledge at the cafe when I left. Like, I still got all of that up in my head. And yeah, you know what? I did learn a new thing or two being there, and I learned a new method or two, and I'm really grateful for that. I'm appreciative of what I did learn over that month, of things that I didn't know before about coffee. But there was a part of me every day that I would go there and I would put on their apron and work behind the counter, that there's a part of me that almost felt like I regressed, if I'm just gonna be very transparent. It took me a very long time after getting laid off from my tech consulting position to step into this version of myself that was the creative. It was Stefania the creative. I mean, literally just 2 months ago, I started referring to this as my job. I think for a very long time I was in denial, because following the layoff, there was a part of me that was like, get back into the corporate world, like find another consulting position, go work for Big Four, whatever. And then there was this other part of me that was pulling me towards like, no, like, let's enjoy life, let's be creative, like, let's dive more into videography, let's work with some of our favorite companies, let's work with some local businesses, like, let's really just be in this feminine creative flow. And I feel like it was like this push and pull for the longest time. And I think following this whole cafe experience that I just had recently, I think that was coming out on the other side the first time where I was like, no, I am Stefania the creative, and this is what I do, this is what I love to do, and I'm gonna keep doing it, and I'm gonna keep chasing after it with everything I got, because this is for me, and this feels the most authentically aligned for me. I love coffee, but I think it's time for me to move on from being a barista and working for someone else. Like, I want to take all of the coffee knowledge that I've accumulated since 2016, and I want to put it towards something that is super meaningful and is genuine and authentic to me. And I want to be able to share that with the world, share that with my community, share that with my followers, my subscribers, my friends, my family. I want to approach this new chapter that I've started a lot different and with a lot more confidence, and embodying this person who I am today versus constantly feeling like I should be doing something else, or my time should be spent over here, or whatever. Like I said earlier, there was a portion of time where I was like, I need to be corporate, like I need to be in another consulting position because that's what other people my age are doing. But the thing is that just because they're doing it doesn't mean that I have to be doing it. And if that's their thing, then I'm happy for you, and I hope you're happy for yourself. But just because you're following that path doesn't mean I need to follow that path too. I'm on a different path, and I'm trying to do different things with my life than maybe people, like other people my age are doing. And it hasn't happened until just recently where I started to accept what I just said out loud. Like, the fact that I literally even just said that out loud to you shows the progress and the growth, because 6 months ago I wasn't even able to say this out loud. Like, I was still in denial over the fact that I was doing content creation full time. I was still getting pushed and pulled and like trying to find different avenues and what should I do and when I feel like I have finally found peace. And let me just be the first one to say, if you feel like you don't have peace in your life and you wake up every morning and your alarm goes off and you're staring at the ceiling and you literally hate your life, you hate what you do, it's literally because you are not supposed to be doing whatever you're doing. And I know it sounds really cliche to like follow your passions, follow your dreams, but do that. Also, I would just like to note too, my degree, my college degree is in entrepreneurship. Technically, I use my degree every damn day. Thank you for listening to my little tea, my little vent session, our little FaceTime session. Toodaloo. Okay, I gotta stop. Love you.